and then across the threshold stepped the youngest son. He was still a sailor and clad in sailor blue, and there was a cutlass in his belt. So shaken with joy was the merchant that for some time he could not utter a word, but merely clung to the strong shoulders of his youngest son. As for the sailor's son, he told his father that he had returned from distant lands only that very evening and had just heard of the misfortunes that had overtaken his family. As they talked, steps were heard outside, and then, without waiting to knock, a sergeant of the king's guard forced open the door, and followed by a handful of soldiers, he entered the room and took the merchant and his son prisoners. They spent the night on the straw in the royal dungeons, and in the morning were led before the king. On seeing the merchant, the irate king scowled more angrily than ever, for the loss of the Emerald of the Sea had never ceased from troubling him, and said, "Well, have you found the Emerald of the Sea?" "No," said the poor merchant. "Summon the executioner," cried out the king. And now the poor man would certainly have bade farewell to earth had not the youngest son, like his brothers, interceded with the king. At first, the king would not hear a word of it, but at length he gave ear to the youngest son's prayer and said, "You shall have another year, but know that this year shall be the last. If you do not return with the Emerald of the Sea within 12 months, nothing shall save you. I have spoken." And thus the sailor's son went in search of the emerald. Now the youngest son had a little boat of his own. It was small, and when the wind no longer filled its sails, it could be rowed along, and in this boat the sailor lad began his voyage. From harbor to harbor, from nation to nation he sailed, but never a soul he found who could tell him anything of the strange black ship with the fiery sails or the lost emerald of the sea. Even the people of the land of the dawn could tell him only that the gem had been sold to an unknown prince. A harsh winter came, and in one of the sudden storms, his little boat went ashore on a rocky coast and was soon pounded to pieces by the waves. The sailor thrown into the sea during the wreck was tossed and trampled by the waves, and he reached the shore far more dead than alive. Had it not been for a poor fisherman and his wife, there would have been no more story to tell. But these good people rescued the sailor from the stormy waters and nursed him back to health and strength again. The sailor told the good couple the story of how he had gone into the world to seek the Emerald of the Sea. "But my poor lad," said the kind fisherman, "the Emerald of the Sea has vanished forever from mortal eyes." "What? You know of the emerald?" cried the sailor. "Yes, my friend," replied the fisherman. 2 years ago, the prince of the unknown isles sent the finest vessel in his fleet to the land of the dawn to buy the jewel. A beautiful ship was she, with a hull as black as night and sails as red as fire. My brother and I sailed in her crew. The Jewel was taken aboard. Our brave ship set sail for the unknown isles. Hardly were we at sea for 3 days when a storm overtook us and sank the vessel. By chance, I was tossed in the water near a floating piece of the broken mast and clung to this until a passing vessel found me. Of all aboard, I alone survived, and now the Emerald of the Sea lies 40 fathoms deep and never more to be seen but by the creatures of the sea. Hearing this, the brave sailor's heart became like ice. Nevertheless, he cried, "My friend, I know that what you say is true, yet I must still try to save my father." Hearing this, the fisherman's wife, a quiet, good woman who had had little to say, whispered that it would be in his best interest to consult the Witch of the Sands. "The Witch of the Sands? Who is she, and where can I find her?" cried the sailor. "The Witch of the Sands lives 100 leagues from here. All the mysteries of the waters are in her keeping, and she has an answer for them all. You must go to her and ask her to help you." So the sailor thanked the good fisherman and his wife and set out to walk the 100 leagues to the house of the Witch of the Sands. His path lay along a desolate and lonely shore on whose rocky beaches old wrecks lay rotting. On the 3rd day, just as the sun was setting into the shining waters, the sailor arrived at the witch's dwelling. The witch had made her home in a deserted old ship which a storm of long ago had cast far up the sands. "Good evening, madam," said the sailor in his politest manner as she came out to greet him. "You are the 3rd person who has come here to ask me about the Emerald of the Sea. I know you are the youngest son. Your 2 brothers, too, have been here to ask me the way under the sea. I told them, but they haven't come back yet. Yes, I can show you, too, the road to under the sea, but do not ask me about the emerald, because I do not know where it is. Now, when you do get to the underwaters, you'll have to hurry back quickly, for the year which the king gave your father is almost gone. Before you can go down into the waters, I shall have to give you an enchanted ring. The path to the city under the sea begins 100 leagues to the north in the high cliffs there. When the tide is low, you'll find the mouth of a great cave. Walk down this cave and down and down and down till you feel water rising around your feet. Then you must put on my ring and then continue to walk ahead. Soon you will see the city shining in the waters. Once there, seek out the king and tell him of your quest. But on no account eat or drink anything offered to you while you are in the underwaters. If you do, you will forget everything of your past life, your father, your quest, and the Emerald of the Sea. Let one drop pass your lips, and you will spend the rest of your life under the waves. Here is the enchanted ring. Put it in your pocket. With these words, the witch took the simple golden ring from a little leather purse and handed it to the youngest son. He put the ring in his pocket, thanked the witch, and set off for the cavern which led to the city under the sea. It did not take the sailor very long to find it. After feeling carefully in his pocket to see if the ring was still safe, the sailor plunged onward into the winding cave. In a short time, the roar of the waves on the beach, which had been loud at the mouth of the cavern, began to fade and grow faint, and the tunnel grew dark and cold. Feeling for the wall of the passage with one hand, the youngest son advanced into the blackness. Down and down and down went the sailor. Then he began to hear the lapping of the wavelets in the darkness, and then a few minutes later he felt himself advancing into deepening water. Then, stopping for an instant, he put on the golden ring as instructed by the witch and continued to walk forward. Soon he felt the water rise from his ankles to his waist, and from his waist to his throat. One step more, and the water closed over his head. Once under the waves, the sailor hesitated, uncertain as to which way to turn. Little by little, however, his eyes grew accustomed to the touch of the water, and he saw, lying on the bottom a few feet ahead of him, a small ball glowing with a pale light. Stooping to touch this strange object, the sailor discovered it to be a small sea plant which had anchored itself to a stone. He soon discovered that this light was but one of thousands. Together they formed a long straight line across the level floor of the sea, and the sailor assumed these lights to be signs of the road of the sea world. The sailor advanced along them slowly until he reached the gate of the city under the sea. The sailor walked through the gate and found himself on the main street of the city. Along the broad avenue grew giant sea plants with brown leaves set out in rows like trees upon the land, and through the foliage, which moved heavily in the currents, little fish darted like little birds do through the branches of trees. Many people